You talked to Ryan. Did he mention to you the thing with the cube and the sphere?
Yeah. I mean, he had said that that's what his fellow pilots had claimed that they had seen, and were seeing on an almost continuous basis.
Yeah. So like from what I understood was when they saw the cube and the sphere, they were flying, and then all of a sudden, like they just passed this thing, and then he said it was like right off of their like the left or the right hand of the plane, like off the wingspan. They didn't necessarily see it move.
That's not what I heard.
Oh, really? What did you hear?
Well, I asked him that specifically as a pilot. I was like, how close were these things? And he said they flew between us, and he said that multiple times. And I said, you have to be more clear. How close were you? Because one of my best friends, Aria Kleinerman, who's a Princeton physics graduate and a commander in the Navy. He actually is higher ranked than Ryan. They're buddies. He went to his wedding. And so Ryan was right there. And I said, when you guys are flying in these formations, how close are you guys? And he said, over a mile apart, typically a mile apart.
Really?
So 2 planes separated by a mile. That means the closest, that they could have been to this thing is half a mile. And they might have perfect vision, but the cube they describe is about 1 meter across. Something like that, and the sphere surrounding it. I always get it mixed up, but I believe that's what it was, about 1 meter or so. So to the visual acuity to see something, imagine you got half a mile, like 10 football fields or more, and you're looking at the football. How could you tell the football was 1 foot big, or could you tell it was 3 feet big?
Yeah,
it could be, if it wasn't glowing or doing something. It's very difficult to do. And again, no aspersions on Ryan. I think what he's doing is very important. And I also think that, he is not claiming he saw it. And it's just like Grush. Grush is not claiming he saw these things. He's saying he has knowledge of people that have seen it. And in the case of Grush, I don't know what his motivations might be. I'd love to talk to him. He seems like a great, again, courageous, valorous, patriotic, whatever. But he's not claiming these things. Ryan has a motive. He actually has a motive. And it happens to be a beneficent one, a good one, in that he's concerned about the safety of his fellow pilots, which actually made me a little bit suspicious. Not of him. I mean, I love him. He's been to my house for dinner. I really enjoy Ryan. But he described, and we talked about...
Did you find it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You want it?
Yeah, throw it up. Yeah,
Okay.
Continue. Sorry.
Okay. So Ryan didn't have this particular fact happen to him, but Fravor did. I don't know if you remember the interview when he did with Lex Friedman and others, but he said, he saw this Tic Tac, and then almost by the time he landed back on the aircraft carrier, his fellow pilots were just hazing him mercilessly, and he was like outranking them. So I could understand like a little bit of teasing or whatever, but they basically didn't believe him. And now Ryan's saying this is happening all the time off the coast of Virginia. By the way, they're both in warning areas, both in the same type of aircraft. One, Ryan's aircraft, and the ones that have been seeing this had just been upgraded to a new type of camera. Right. Again, they use these cameras to lock on to see, they'll do everything from my friend Ariel, I don't think it's classified, I think he talked about, he shot down an Iranian drone over the Persian Gulf during the Iraq War. They see these things all the time, and it was right after they upgraded the systems.
Right.
Why do they upgrade them? They have to calibrate them, and they have to get better and better systems. Fravor's one was 20 years old now, by now about 20 years old, and 10 years older than the one that Ryan Graves had been using, or his squadron. So the question is, why would they be kind of hazing somebody if indeed it was causing this grave threat and something's happening all the time? Why is it happening in these warning areas? Why is it happening in places where they do training? It's not happening. Why aren't there by ratio of proportion tens of thousands of commercial pilots, private pilots like me, seeing it, reporting it? I could see if you're a commercial pilot and you report this. If you get hazed in the Navy, they're not going to kick you out. They're just going to put like a fuzzy alien on your bunk. If you're in flying for American Airlines and you keep reporting this, you probably would get either put on psychiatric leave or something like that. So there's a big imperative to keep quiet probably for those people. But people like me, just private pilots flying, sometimes I fly cancer patients to get treatments, and it's called Angel Flight, which is a great charity people should be aware of. There's no incentive for me not to report this. There's no reporting platform that is as good as the one that Ryan's going to make with the Americans for Safe Aerospace. So there's a motive. It's a good one for him to do it. I think you have to ask, well, why aren't there more sightings by people that have no skin in the game?
So this is an interesting article.
Yeah.
My friend Jeremy Reese pointed this out to me. Scroll down.
Yeah, I've talked to Jeremy before.
Okay, so this is a patent. And this is a radar deflector that was used during I think it was developed during like the Bay of Pigs to spoof radar.
Yeah, it's like U.S. patent 2 million.
Yeah, so can you zoom in on the text?
9 million, so this is probably 60 or 50.
Can you zoom in, punch in a little bit on it so we can read it? Yeah. Scroll up.
Yeah, airborne corner reflector.
Yeah,
corner
right there.
reflectors on your bicycle.
Yep, high altitude balloons, doesn't have, if any, the radar cross-section metallic. Yeah. So it tells you the exact patent number.
Yeah.
And that thing looks exactly like what they described.
Yeah. No,
the cube inside the sphere.
And here's another thing I can say with great accuracy. I guarantee that these exist. In other words, if you lived in a world where these didn't exist, say you get a letter from God, these balloons don't exist for benign purposes, for calibration and sensor testing. If you said that they're forbidden by every treaty on every country on Earth, like anthrax is, okay, then you'd say, well, there's less probability, but there's probably still some left over. But now you tell me, which I thank you for, these are common. These are probably in use by every military on Earth to train their stuff. I saw this video of like Ukrainian drone pilots that are dropping like tank shells, and they're so poor. Their military is, I'm not going to take sides or whatever, but they have radar jamming. And they have anti-drone channel jamming technology that makes a fake drone appear on the road.
Right, exactly.
They have this with like no money. And so I guarantee, so we are both in agreement.
It makes it look like a fleet is coming at you when there's nothing coming at you.
Nothing comes, so you waste all your attention, right? These warheads have multiple targets in them.
Right, and so if you were to test this in front of U.S. military training site, and they just upgraded their radar, why wouldn't you want to be trying to test it?
Where would you have this? That's a very good point. Yep.
Like getting back to this whole thing, when I start to see the New York Times and the Pentagon start to corroborate these stories in lockstep, that's when I really start to question it. And when it comes to these videos, like that they released, right? The Go Fast, the gimbal, and I forget what the other one was. I was talking to Ryan. Who named those videos? Who came up with that name, Go Fast? Who came up with that name, gimbal? Because those pilots, I know the pilots did not.
Yeah. So one of the so there's a set, and again, talk to Ryan, talk to my friend Ariel, but there's a set of military. So after a flight, every plane that flies for 1 hour has a scrutiny around it of about 10 hours just for the debrief. So when they come back, they land on the carrier or they land at the Air Force jet, and they debrief the flight every single minute, because every minute costs about $8,000 in total investment for every single plane. Imagine how much money we have, right? And then there's 10 hours of maintenance for every single plane that goes, all right, so that's separate from that. They review all the gun cameras, they review all the sensor data, they review everything. People pour over it. And there's some analysts, who, in the past, before we had drone operators, there were people that were officers that would be intelligence officers, and they would review stuff. And then like when they would review it, they'd listen to something and they'd just name it. So a gimbal is just a camera on a platform like a GoPro, or not a GoPro, but one of those stabilized things. Yeah. And the other one, Go Fast, I think one of the pilots says, "Oh, look at that thing, it's fast," or whatever, and then they just call it that. Then there are other ones that have been, fairly, like the bokeh and those ones. I mean, this guy, Mick West.
The triangles?
Yeah, the triangles.
Yeah, bokeh, yeah.
A lot of those things are artifacts of cameras. Yes. So the question is, can you explain all of these things? And my colleague and actually mentor and president of the Simons Foundation, David Spergel, was the chairman of the NASA Committee on UAP research that announced its findings this past summer. And I think that they said some very large fraction was explainable by natural events, but there's always going to be that 12 to 30% that's not explainable. And the question is, at what level do you start to ascribe conspiracy, cover-ups, versus the honest admission of a scientist, the three most important words that any scientist must be able to say. And if they can't, they're not a scientist, and that's "I don't know."